He put 4 times the value of her house on the table. She pushed it back without blinking. Eleonora Thompson catalogs the histories of old soul buildings for a living. She is black, precise, and alone, holding the last brick house on a block a crime family already owns. Everything around it is rubble and red survey marks. Her house is the only thing standing between the Kang family and a billion-dollar tower. So they send the heir. Kang Do-hyun is tall, quiet, and dangerous, the dark ink of a survivor's tattoo climbing his neck above a tailored collar. He offers money. She says no. He offers a new house, protection, a fortune, a life she'd never have to work for again. She says no to all of it. He has never met a person he couldn't buy, and it is starting to unsettle him. Then he finds a photograph in her grandmother's papers, and a line scratched on the back, and an old pine tree in her garden with something buried beneath it. What her grandmother hid there was worth killing for. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Eleonora Thompson pressed the old deed flat under the lamp and read the same line for the 3rd time. The sale date was 28 years old. The sale had never happened. Somebody had wanted it to look like it did. The municipal archive closed at 9. It was past 11. She kept the light low so the night guard wouldn't come asking, and she photographed the page before anyone could decide it was missing. A folder slid across her desk. Not hers. They asked me to give you this, the day clerk said, already in his coat. He wouldn't look at her. Final offer. They said you'd understand what final means. The Kang Development Group logo sat in the corner like a watermark on water. Eleonora didn't open it. She set her grandmother's deed on top of it instead, brown paper over cold gloss. Tell them I got it. Eleonora, he lowered his voice. Your access badge is on their list too. You make these people wait, and the archive stops needing a researcher. He left before she could answer. She sat with the 2 folders touching. One was a house, the other was a threat wearing a signature. She had grown up watching her mother measure freedom in dollars she didn't have, and she had promised herself she would never let a number decide where she was allowed to stand. She locked the deed in her satchel and walked home through the half-demolished block. The neighborhood was dying in straight lines. Every house around her grandmother's had a red survey mark and a chain across the gate. Excavators slept in the gaps where kitchens used to be. Her house stood alone at the end. 2 floors of dark brick, a small garden, a workshop leaning against the back wall, and one old pine that had been there longer than the street. She let herself in. The house smelled of dust and cedar and her grandmother. She didn't turn on the hall light. She knew every step. Upstairs, she pulled the archive box from under the bed, the one the family lawyer had shipped from the estate, and worked through it the way she worked through everything, slowly, twice. Receipts, a ration card, a church program, and at the bottom, wrapped in a handkerchief, a photograph. 3 people in front of a brick house. Her grandmother, young, laughing. 2 Korean men she didn't know, and a 4th figure at the edge, half-turned, a young man with a hard jaw and careful eyes. She turned it over, a date, and a line in her grandmother's hand. If anything happens to us, the proof stays beneath the pine. Eleonora sat very still. The house behind them in the photograph was this house. The pine behind them was her pine. She looked out the window at the black shape of it in the garden, and for the first time, the offer downstairs felt like something other than money. The next morning, they sent the heir. She wasn't told his name. She was told to come to a glass room on the 40th floor of a tower that hadn't existed when her grandmother bought the house. A woman with a headset walked her past desks of blurred employees and opened a door onto a table too long for the four people at it. Three of them were executives. The fourth stood at the window with his back to her, and when he turned, the room seemed to reorganize itself around him. Kang Do-hyun didn't offer his hand. He gestured at the chair. He was tall, broad, unhurried, in a charcoal suit with the top button of his shirt open, and where the collar fell away, she saw the black edge of a tattoo climbing his neck, a branch, a line of lightning, something that had survived being struck. Ms. Thompson. His English was low and exact. "Thank you for coming." An executive slid a leather folder toward her and opened it to the number. It was nearly 4 times what the house was worth. It was more money than her mother had earned in a lifetime of staying. Eleonora read it. She read it twice, the way she read everything. Then she closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. No. The executives glanced at each other. Do-hyun didn't. He watched her, the way a man watches a lock he expected to open on the first try. "That's the opening figure," he said, "not the ceiling." I understood the figure. "Then name yours." A faint patience, the kind money buys. "How much?" "It isn't for sale." "Everything is for sale, Miss Thompson." He said it gently, as a fact, not a boast. "The only question is the price." She looked at him then, really looked, past the suit, past the tower, past the tattoo. "Then you've spent too much time around people who needed your money." For a moment, the glass room held nothing but the hum of the air. One executive opened his mouth and closed it. Do-hyun said nothing at all. It was the first time in that building that anyone had watched him have no answer ready. He recovered the way powerful men recover, by ending the meeting. "Take the week," he said. "Read it again." "I don't need to." She stood, satchel on her shoulder, grandmother's deed inside it. "But you should ask your family why a sale from 28 years ago is missing 3 pages. She saw it land. Just a flicker. A stillness that came a half-second too fast. He hadn't known. Eleonora walked out past the blurred desks and didn't look back, and behind the glass, Kang Do-hyun stood over a folder no one had ever refused, turning her last sentence over like a coin he couldn't spend. That night, someone tried the side lock of the brick house for the first time. The scratch marks around the side lock were fresh and low, the work of someone who knew houses. Eleonora photographed them before she called anyone, and she called no one. Do-hyun came himself, 3 days later, without executives. He stood in her narrow hallway looking too large for it, a man built for tables the length of rooms, and he set a paper cup of coffee on her workshop bench before he touched his own. She noticed that, she noticed most things. "I pulled the registry," he said. "You were right, 3 pages are gone. The transfer was filed, stamped, and never completed." He turned the cup slowly on the wood. "My family bought this whole block, except this house. And this is the only file that's been touched. Why does that bother you?" "Because I'm the one who's supposed to know everything this company does." He looked at the pine through the back window. "And I don't know this." He raised his second offer standing in her kitchen. More money, a luxury residence anywhere in Seoul, the move paid in full. Lifetime compensation, structured so she would never work again unless she chose to. "No," Eleonora said. He studied her, not angry, curious in a way that unsettled her more than anger would have. "You could have asked for millions in that meeting. You asked for nothing. People who want nothing frighten my father." A pause. "They're starting to interest me." She almost told him about the photograph then. She didn't. Instead, she led him to the garden and put her hand on the pine's rough bark, and she watched his face when she said her grandmother's line out loud. "The proof stays beneath the pine." Something moved behind his eyes. Not recognition, but the shape of it. A door he'd walked past his whole life. They began, without naming it, to work together. He came in the evenings, alone. He learned that she stayed until midnight and forgot to eat, and he started bringing food she didn't ask for and setting it down without comment. She learned that his hands knew wood. He rehung her crooked workshop door in 20 minutes and said his grandfather had taught him carpentry before the family taught him everything else. "You could hire someone to do that," she said. "I could hire someone to do anything." He tested the hinge. It held. "This is the only thing I'm allowed to do with my own hands." He was, she realized, two men. There was Kang Do-hyun, and there was the Kang family, and for the first time she could see the seam between them. Then the house was broken into for real. She came home to a torn kitchen, drawers on the floor, the archive box emptied, the handkerchief gone. Whoever it was had wanted the photograph. She had it in her satchel, always. But they didn't know that. She stood in the wreckage with her heart slamming and did not cry, because crying was a thing you did when you had time. Do-hyun arrived within the hour with Han Min-sok, his chief of security, a compact man with a scarred brow who looked at Eleonora the way a customs officer looks at a suitcase. "Come to a protected property," Do-hyun said. "Tonight." "No." "Ms. Thompson." "I said no." "Then let me post men on the house." "No." She met his eyes and held them. "Do you refuse everything I give you?" he asked, and there was real frustration in it now. The frustration of a man whose entire language was giving. "Only the things that come with invisible chains," she said. It stopped him cold. Min-suk looked away. Do-hyun stood in her ruined kitchen and understood, maybe for the first time, that every gift he had ever handed anyone had also been a leash. He didn't post men, but Min-suk stayed close, and Min-suk, being Min-suk, did what he always did. He investigated the woman. He pulled her grandmother's immigration record, her decades in Seoul, the names she'd lived beside, and a name surfaced that made him drive straight to Do-hyun's residence and wait in the dark hall until his employer came home. "Your mother," Min-suk said. She knew the old woman. "Thompson's grandmother." Do-hyun went still. They ran something together. Min-suk laid a thin folder on the table, the way the executives had once laid an offer in front of Eleonora, and the symmetry of it was not lost on either of them. Quietly. For years. Women, families, people buried under debts this company owned. Your mother helped them disappear. The old woman hid the paperwork that proved the debts were fraud. "My mother died in a car accident." Do-hyun's voice was very even. 14 years ago. "I know what the file says." Min-suk didn't blink. "Your father found out what they were doing. Most of the evidence was destroyed after that." He tapped the folder once. "Most, not all. The old woman kept the rest somewhere he never found it." Do-hyun stood at the window of a house his family's money had built and looked out at a city his family half-owned and finally understood what he had been circling for weeks. Eleonora had never been an obstacle in a real estate deal. She was the last door to a room his own father had spent 14 years trying to seal. He drove to the brick house before dawn. She was awake, the photograph on the table between them, and he set his mother's name down beside it, like a card he'd been holding his whole life without knowing. "Tell me everything your grandmother left you," he said. "Please." It was the first time she had heard him ask for anything instead of offering it. The car came for her on a Tuesday, in daylight, which was how she knew it was serious. Eleonora was crossing to the archive when the engine changed pitch behind her. She heard it the way you hear weather turn. She stepped back between two parked delivery vans on instinct, and the black sedan clipped a mirror where her hip had been and was gone before the street finished flinching. She stood in the gap between the vans, shaking, holding the satchel to her chest. Inside it, the photograph, the deed, a life someone was willing to end over. Min Sok found the sedan abandoned 2 districts away, wiped clean. Whoever had sent it had money and reach and the patience to try again. Do-hyun took her to his private residence that night, and this time she went, because the house with the pine was no longer a place she could sleep. The residence was contemporary Korean, dark wood, stone, glass walls holding back the whole glittering city. It was beautiful. It was too quiet, the quiet of a place where no one had ever been happy. He gave her the largest room and stood in the doorway as if he needed permission to cross it. She came down after midnight and found him at a long table with documents fanned across it, and she understood, before he said a word, that he had decided to solve her the only way he knew. He laid them out one at a time, watching her face. An apartment, deeded in her name, in the safest building he owned. A bank account, funded so heavily, she would never again measure freedom in numbers. Lifetime protection, Min Sok's people, invisible, permanent. Legitimate shares in the Clean Kang companies, real ownership, real votes. Eleonora said nothing. She had learned that silence unsettled him more than refusal. He set down one more page. She read it and felt her breath catch despite herself. He had transferred the brick house back to her, whole, unconditional, and canceled the tower project that had eaten the entire block. It would cost the Kang family hundreds of millions. He had signed it already. Why? She asked. Because you were right. He didn't look away. About the money, about the chains, about all of it. Then he took a small case from his coat and set it on the documents and opened it. A ring. Not a negotiation, not a leash. The last thing a man like him had left to give. He didn't kneel. It wouldn't have been him. He just looked at her across the table where he'd laid down everything he owned and said it plainly. My home, my name, everything I have, stay. The city burned quietly behind the glass. Somewhere in that silence was the answer he had spent his whole life assuming money guaranteed. He had never, in 41 years, offered anyone this much. She could see that too. She could see exactly what it cost him to stand there, with his hands finally empty. Eleonora looked at the ring. She looked at the man. She already loved him. She had known it for days, carried it like a second secret, and that was what made the next word so hard to say and so necessary. No. He went very still. For once, he had no folder to slide forward, no ceiling above the figure. You're offering me everything, she said, except the one thing I asked for. What? His voice had lost its evenness. Name it. I've canceled a tower. I've signed away the truth. The word sat between them, heavier than any of the documents. You still haven't told me what happened to your mother, she said. You've told me she died. You've told me the file lies. But you haven't told me what. You. No, because part of you is still protecting the thing that killed her. You want me to build a life inside a family that buried other families. She closed the case gently and pushed it back across the table, the way she had once pushed back an offer in a glass room. I won't love half a man, Do-hyun. I won't marry the part of you that still keeps the secret. She saw it break something open in him, not anger, grief. The particular grief of a man realizing that the one currency he'd trusted his whole life was worthless, with the only person he wanted. You don't understand what telling you would cost, he said quietly. I understand exactly what it costs. She stood. That's why it's the only thing worth asking for. She went up to the too large room and lay awake, and downstairs he sat with the ring and the deed and the canceled tower, everything he owned spread out and none of it enough. And for the first time, the heir to the Kang Empire, understood that he had finally found the one door his family's fortune couldn't open. Before dawn, Minsok woke him. A second file had surfaced. His mother's accident report. The original. Before it was rewritten. The break line. The witness who recanted. And a routing note. An internal authorization. Buried under 14 years of careful erasing. That told him whose hand had really moved that night. Do-hyun read it once. He set it down with a control so total it frightened Minsok more than shouting would have. "Get the house watched," he said, "not to protect the property." He was already reaching for his coat, to protect what's under the pine, and to catch the man who's coming for it. Because he finally knew who wanted Eleonora dead, and it was not a stranger. It was blood. He told her at the kitchen table, at last, with the sun not yet up. "My mother didn't die on a wet road." Do-hyun's hands were flat on the wood. She'd gathered evidence, the fraudulent debts, the names, the accounts. She was going to hand it to people outside the family. Her car was arranged, the brake line, a witness paid to forget. He breathed out slowly. "I've believed for 14 years that my father gave the order. I stayed inside the family to prove it. I never could. And now? Now I have the routing note she couldn't destroy in time." He looked up. "It wasn't my father." He said the name like something being pulled out of his own chest. Kang Jae-sung. The cousin. The pale suits, the warm smile that stopped at the eyes, the reasonable voice in every boardroom. The man who would have inherited everything if Do-hyun had died young, and who understood, better than anyone, that a Kang with a conscience would dismantle the whole machine that his future depended on. Do-hyun's mother had been that conscience. Now Eleonora, and whatever her grandmother buried, threatened to finish what his mother started. "He's the one who's been trying to seize this house," Do-hyun said. "He's the one who sent the car. He can't afford what's under that tree." They went into the garden with the first gray light. It took them an hour beneath the old pine, digging where the roots made a hollow. Do-hyun's hands, the carpenter's hands, not the heir's, found the edge of a metal case sealed in wax cloth. Inside, ledgers in two hands, one her grandmother's and one his mother's. Photographs, old cassette tapes, names and account numbers going back 30 years, and a single envelope labeled in his mother's writing, holding the proof of her own murder. "She left it for whoever was brave enough to dig," Eleonora said softly. "Two women." Do-hyun turned a tape over in his fingers. "My mother and your grandmother. They protected this for 30 years so that no one would have to keep paying." The workshop light clicked on behind them. Jae-sung stood in the doorway in a dove gray suit, immaculate at dawn, a canister already in his hand, the smell of accelerant reaching them before his voice did. Two men flanked him. "You should have taken the money, Miss Thompson." His smile never wavered. It was such a generous number. He didn't want a confrontation. He wanted an accident. A fire in an old house with old wiring, two bodies, a buried box that never existed. He tipped the canister, and the workshop caught with a soft, terrible sound, and one of his men shoved the door, and the frame Do-hyun himself had rehung, buckled, and jammed with Eleonora on the wrong side of it. Do-hyun had the case in his arms. 30 years of proof. His mother's murder. The end of Jae-sung. And he had a clear path through the garden gate to the man who killed her. He dropped the case. He threw his shoulder into the jammed door his own hands had built, once, twice, splintering it, and pulled Eleonora out through the smoke into the wet garden as the workshop roared behind them. Jae-sung was already moving for the gate. He didn't get far. Min-suk's people had been watching the house since midnight, not the property, the pine, and they took him in the lane with the canister still in his hand and the accelerant still on his sleeve, while the evidence Eleonora had carried in her satchel all along, The copies, the photograph, the routing note went where Jae-sung could never burn them, to the people outside the family his mother had died trying to reach. The empire cracked down the middle. Jae-sung fell to the evidence and the law, and the tapes his mother had recorded played in rooms he could not charm. Kang Sung-ho, the patriarch who believed every man had a price, lived to watch his own house judged by a woman who had none. He kept asking Do-hyun the same question through it all. What does she want? And this time his son answered him. Nothing you can give her. The old man lost most of what he'd spent a lifetime hoarding, and for the first time looked afraid. Do-hyun began pulling the family out of the dark businesses one file at a time. Slowly, the only honest way there was. He handed names to the people outside the family his mother had died trying to reach. He made the clean companies his whole work. It did not make him a good man overnight, and he never pretended it did. But he chose, with every file, that the next generation would inherit something else. He did not ask Eleonora to marry him again. That was the point. A man who offers nothing has nothing to hold over you. Months later, the brick house wore scaffolding instead of survey marks. They restored it together, her records, his hands. The workshop rose again from its own ash. The pine, scorched on one side, put out new green anyway, the way it had after the lightning. She found him in the garden one evening, sanding the new doorframe, sawdust in the gray at his temples. She held something out to him, the small case, the ring. He looked at it, then at her, and did not reach for it. Ask me again, Eleonora said. For a long moment he only looked at her, this man who had once believed everything could be bought, holding out his empty carpenter's hands. Then he asked, no tower behind it, no account, no name offered like a leash, just the question. And this time she answered. Yes. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Has someone ever tried to buy your silence with comfort when all you wanted was the truth? Would you refuse everything a powerful person offered if the one thing you asked for was the one thing they kept hiding? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about truth, dignity, and dangerous love, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.